Oh, welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kendar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 90. Quigley shoved the runner to the center of the room, and the boy looked around at the damaged wall. They were in the warehouse Tibs used to train his control. They were in the warehouse Tibs used to train his control over the elements. And the walls were scratched, cut, and the part that had fallen due to rot were improperly covered. What was left of the wooden crates was crates plural, so this is were piled up in a far corner. Jekyll assured him that no one would come claiming the building anytime soon. Tibs sighed as he looked the boy over. He couldn't be much older than Tibs had been when he arrived, and after everything he'd gone through, he looked much younger than Tibs felt. He was named Drasko, and he was a rogue, as those who were as and he was a rogue as those fell directly under Tibs' supervision. And he'd recently graduated to Upsilon with their assistance, although Tibs didn't know what they provided beyond the armor and weapon. Almost certainly training, but with handling the merchants, the patrol, and his own training, Tibs hadn't had time to help with that aspect. Not to say of all the papers he had to read as part of making sure the coins balanced. When he'd asked Jekyll to take over dealing with the merchant, the fighter had laughed. This I need to alter a little bit because, of course, you're sort of read it as taking care of the protection, which the merchant's accounts. The fighter had laughed so hard he'd fallen out of his chair. Along with the rogue, Quigley and Tibs were a handful of other runners, there to witness and make sure the punishment wasn't so out of scale with the crime. Karina called them the Board of Impartiality. Tibs hadn't asked what they had to do with planks, but had to ask about impartiality. Impartiality. Should explain it meant they would be fair. Tibs didn't know that would be true. Tibs didn't know that would be true. He knew too well how vindictive people were. So having didn't know that would be true, but he knew too well how vindictive people were. So having someone there to keep things from getting out of hand made sense. With them was the merchant Drasko had been caught stealing from, Anna of Soster. Her shop sold a variety of items to put in houses. This was the first time a rogue broke his rules. This was the first time a rogue broke Tibs' rules. When Tibs had been informed, Jekyll had smirked and pointed out he'd had to knock heads dozens of times already among fighters to keep them from fighting where they weren't supposed to. Tibs was annoyed. It had happened at all. His rules were fair and didn't charge for the assistance they provided. So why had he needed to steal. Why? Tibbs asked. What do you mean, why? Dusko asked, just spoke up. I'm a rogue. It's what I do. Tibbs rubbed his temple. Whoever, because he found out it wasn't something the transportation platform did, but someone, had woven the magic when the last group of runner had transported to Traggle Rock, had done a poor job of it. All of them spoke with an accent that at times made it difficult to understand. If sorcerers didn't demand so many coins, they would have done it again, so they'd speak properly. You don't have to steal, Rickety, he asked with derision. Mind your Quigley arms was up. Don't, Tibbs ordered. I'm not going to have someone beaten just because he doesn't know who I am. And, oh, I know you, the boy said with a snort. You're the hero of the dungeon. Like you could save anyone. He smirked. You saved the town, Quigley stated. John did that, the runner countered, and added in a tone that said he wasn't sure that was true. He helped. I'm still in charge of protecting the merchant. This wasn't arguing over who protected the town anymore, with him and Harry doing it officially and Don claiming some of it as part of being the guild's go-between, and who set the rules you have to obey, one of which is the merchants are off limit. We need them for supplies, and they need us to sell them what the guild lets us keep. If we don't work together, it's going to make the runs tougher. Drasko snorted again. I don't need you or this. My team does the run fine. Tibbs didn't think Don had put him up to it. They needed each other too much to actively interfere in how the town worked. Don was the hero of Craggle Rock, the one anyone talked to when they needed the guild to act on something. Don loved how important that made him, and even if he complained to Tibbs how his teacher was now on his back about demonstrating the good that corruption could do. Tibbs was still second to him in who the townsfolk considered important, and with the attempt on the dungeon growing ever back in time, some of the newcomers didn't even know who Tibbs was. Tibbs didn't mind being forgotten. If your team doesn't need the help, why did you accept it? Tibbs asked. The runner beamed. I never turned my back on something that's given for free. It wasn't free, Tibbs said. You were told the rules, and obeying them is the price. How am I going to practice? Drasko demanded. I don't know just pick pockets. I want the stuff. Buy it, Tibbs replied, keeping his mounting annoyance at having to parse what he said to himself. The dungeon gives you plenty. The runner snorted. Have you started on the second floor? The fearful expression answered him and put the lie to his statement he didn't need help. He didn't need their help. Once you do, you'll see the loot gets better. As for training, break into a noble's house instead, there's a comma here, and take something small. They have so much they won't notice it. You're crazy, Crystal demanded. They're gonna beat me for it. Only if, Quickly shook his head. Tibbs sighed. What happened? Stick answered. We've had some of the trainees pick on Noble's house before they were ready in. They were still alive when we found them, but we had to go to those clerics that do the rounds. The rounds of the bad part of town to get them on their feet. Yeah. Why did they do it if they weren't ready? Seems there's this kid running around the roofs who gets in and out of Noble's house without even pausing, they said with mild reproach. If that girl can do it, they got to be able to. Tibbs stared. Why haven't I been told? I could have explained to them how long I've been doing this. The rogue trainer shrugged. You've been busy. Never too busy to know what rogues are having problems. That's my responsibility. Not that he was sure anyone would have listened to him, but he suspected Stick was quietly undermining Tibbs' position. The rogue hadn't lied in anything he'd said, but he could be skirting the truth in ways Tibbs couldn't pick up on yet. He considered Drasko. All right, I'll look for a way to address proper training. You still broke the rules, so you need to be punished. I give it back, he complained, glaring at Quigley. And that's one part of it I don't have to worry about. I'm not handing you over to Harry because your team would end up paying too. Jekyll had told him to have cells made, but Tibbs didn't see a point in them. Those who went through Harry's cells didn't come back with a new way to look at what they'd done. Neither had those from his street, if they came back. Now, they just went back to how they did things and tried not to get caught another time. Tibbs didn't want it to train his rogue in not getting caught. Well, not exclusively that. He wanted them to be people the townfolk trusted. The people townfolk trusted would go to if there was a problem. He was trying to turn the rogue. He was trying to turn rogues into trustworthy people? He could hear Jackal laughing again. Only Tibbs was after the town trusting them, getting them to see Craggle Rock as their home, not another cell. Except Tibbs was simply trying to get town. Yeah. To see, you wanted the rogues to secure their home. Not another cell. Alright, let's try this. He was trying to turn rogues into trustworthy people? He could hear Jackal laugh again. Except Tibbs was simply trying to get the town to trust them, not respect all the laws. He wanted the rogues to see Craggle Rock as their home, not another cell they'd been sent to. Hannah wore a dress in light purple and blue. Seeing her in the street, Tibbs would think her one of the poor nobles instead of a successful merchant. She was one of the few merchants left over from when Tibbs had arrived, which was why he knew her name. He was so busy he didn't have the time to visit the newer shops, to get to know the owners the way he felt he should. Certainly didn't have the time to meet those who were setting up their shops at the periphery of Marketplace. Was there an element? Anna, do you need help in your shop? Maybe seeing the runner doing more than enjoying their rest and train between runs would help the town see them as being part of them. Ugh. The townsfolk. Have the townsfolk see them as... Okay, it's the them. Maybe seeing the runners doing more than enjoying their rest and train between runs would help the townfolk see them as being part of the town. Might also get Drasco to feel like he was one of them. He chuckled. There's always need for help. Most come here for the excitement of the dungeon, not the tedium of shop work. Then an extra set of hands for... This was Draco's first time breaking the rules, being caught breaking them. He hadn't come across any report from the merchants about being robbed, and he was sure they would jump on the chance to pay less than they owed. Still wanted this to show he took their security seriously, that he wasn't the guild. But he couldn't be so harsh that Stick could band the rogues and runners against him. He rubbed his temple again. He was understanding why Jackal knocked heads together when it came to teaching fighters to follow the rules. So much simpler. Would 2 weeks be helpful? I can't do that. Drasco protested as she studied him. It's that or Harry's cell. He replied, not interested in looking for an alternative more acceptable to the rogue, but I'll arrange for you to get supervised training so that when you do break into a noble's house, you won't have to worry about getting caught. He could sweeten the deal, except that it means he'd only work in the morning, Tibs told the merchant, and if he has a run, he doesn't have to work on that day or the one after, he added, remembering how exhausting the runs used to be before he had Purity to help him. It would, and okay. It would. Yeah, I need to specify who's talking earlier. It would, she replied, and added to Brasco. It would, she replied, then added to Brasco, and I'll pay you a copper for the half day of work. And I looked at her suspiciously. Why'd you do that? How's the punishment if I'm getting paid? She smiled. The work will be arduous enough, and I think that the coins will act as an incentive for you not to consider that an opportunity to steal again. That's 18 coppers, Pesco said thoughtfully, and she nodded. Make it the study of that herding horse instead, and we got a deal. The small one, with the black hooves. That's an oddly specific request, she replied with a raised eyebrow. That's the one I was after. The rest was just shrugged. They were there. All right, she said after thinking it over. After 2 weeks of work for me, you get the statue of Strident Rearing. Statue of names? He said aside. So this works for you. She nodded. How about you? He asked Drasko when he didn't answer. Me? He replied, surprised. Why do you care? There's stifled a sigh. Because if you're not happy about this, you're going to look for ways to get back at me. And I don't have the time for that. He thought about it. Guess it's fair. I'd get worse back home. Good. Then be at Anna's shop tomorrow when it opens. I'll have someone meet you for your training once you're done there. Stick. They laughed, with Stick hanging back until Quigley motioned for him to leave. Not letting Stick deal with that one? Foster asked in a tone that told Tibs he knew the rogue was up to something. How dangerous is he becoming? Quigley shrugged. He has aspirations. That's always trouble. What kind of training are you planning on giving Drasko? Tibs glared at the fighter. Did he have any idea how busy he already was? He could personally see the training of another runner. More than hitting someone on the head. Quickly chuckled. If that's what you think fighting's about, I'm not doing a good job of teaching you. That's not play. Of teaching you sword play. That's not play. Tibbs replied, having memories of the bruises to support the claim, which reminded him, what are the cleric asking as payment? Nothing. He narrowed his eyes. It was one thing for a cleric to go around helping the townsfolk, but to be sought and have to work for the runners? Well, he knew one who'd do it, but she couldn't be the only one involved. Quigley had made it sound like it had happened multiple times already. I swear they aren't. One's doing it because purity demands it. Another because he wants the training and got tired of waiting for his turn at the door. One uses it as an excuse to get away from the old crystal, her words. He paused. I think we're getting the rebels, or the clerics, if there is such a thing. He took the fighter at his word, so he wouldn't have to worry about yet another thing. Although, if they needed the training, why weren't they set among the team? Why weren't they placed among the teams yet? Could the animosity the siege had created between the clerics and the guild be that bad? And if it was, why still be here at all? Do you have any idea how we can train them to break into a noble's house so they aren't going to be caught and beaten when they finally try it? He asked. You're asking a warrior about rogue stuff? I'm asking someone older than I am, Tibbs replied, who's seen more than I have. I've seen war, Tibbs, not housebreaking. But using that, I'd say that whatever else you do, you need to have lookouts to keep an eye outside and someone competent with them inside to assist if it gets to that. Them having their own guards, we can't depend on them. With them having their own guards, we can't depend on them always keeping in mind where they're runners. Some might start just vanishing. Lookouts and muscles. Tibbs grumbled, that sounds a lot like the gangs did on my street. They shrugged. People use what works. He took a step towards the door and stopped. Of course, an even safer way to let them train is to get the nobles whose house they're going to be breaking into to Of course, an even safer way to let them train is to get the noble whose house Just a comma here. Whose house they're going to break into, to break in, to go along with it. He grinned. If you can trust one of them with something like that. Tibs snorted like he'd ever be like dead. I know. Okay, you know what? Like there would ever be one noble he trusted with anyone's safety, let alone a rogue. Lee? Can't believe you talked me into this, Ness complained as he led Tibs to part of the town he'd only seen before from the roofs. The road was paved with flat stone. The houses on each side were pushed far enough back an entire house would fit on that lawn. Before he'd gotten more their essence. Reaching these roofs had been challenging. The people who noticed them stare. No, who noticed Tibs. The guards looked ready to grab him and throw him out back where he came from. Some of them even looked ready to question Maz about why he was associated with someone like Tibs. Tibs was dressed in the best set of clothing he owned, and he still shouted that he didn't belong here. By contrast, Maz, in his leather armor emblazoned with red gems, and the orange cape with ash gray border, looked the regal part of a noble, even if Tibs knew he wasn't a fan of the people they were walking on. Tibs wasn't either. He wanted to be on the roofs, unseen, instead of looked at with disdain. Or he didn't feel like they silently, told him to go back to the street. That street he was keeping them out of. Please be courteous with her, Tibs, Miss said as they approached a house that fit the others, that looked as ostentatious and as much of a waste of space better used to have. As essential and as much of a waste of space better used to house more families as any of the other in this part of the town. I know nobles aren't all that great, but she's one of the better ones. Tibs's reflex was to argue that a noble was a noble and there was nothing redeeming them. But this one, Tibs hadn't actively looked for anything bad she did. He hadn't had to with the other nobles. They were always getting themselves known by causing trouble, demanding things be done their way, even when they were the ones intruding. She seemed to be helping. She'd helped when Tibs had first organized the protection for the merchant against Sebastian. He hadn't been able to confirm any of them, but there were stories that she had protected some of the poor neighborhoods during the siege, before and since. She went around the town, helping in one way or another, and she had yet to demand anything in return. Quigley had said he'd need to trust a noble. He didn't know if he could trust her. Maz stepped up to the opulent door and pulled a cord that caused the bell to ring deep inside the house. But Tibs was willing to try. The door opened, and instead of a servant, the woman who answered wore a white shirt and pants trimmed in red. Her long brown hair was held behind her by braids of gold and blue and green with blue and green gems set in them. The necklace around her neck was also gold, with a sparkling red gem set in its center. It was an amulet with as tight of a reserve of fire essence as Tibs had ever sensed. Mazzano! Amelia exclaimed, then hugged him. It's such a pleasure to see you again. I miss our times on the archery field. I hear you're becoming the accomplished archer. Thank you, my lady. He replied with more formality than Tibs expected. Your assistance was, as always, invaluable in me becoming the archer that I am. She looked surprised by the attitude. I doubt I did that much to help you understand fire. Oh, you were part of it. Tibs grumbled without meaning to, remembering that argument. That, Maya said in a tone clipped, is Tibs. I'm certain you remember him. Tibs could see how harsh it was for the archer not to turn and glare at how hard it was for the archer not to turn and glare at him. Mr. Tibs Lightfinger, she said with a smile. It's good to see you again. I hear you played an important part in ending the siege. Andia, she called to the inside. Pour 4 crystals of wine. We have guests. Please, come in. She motioned for them to enter. We won't be here long enough to warrant refreshment, as objected. Nonsense, Mazzano. It isn't often I get to enjoy the runner's company anymore. I'm not letting this one pass. And relax. There's no one inside the house who rate your behavior. The statement made the archer visibly uncomfortable. I want to get your house broken into, Tibs stated, figuring she would end this. He would end this. He should end this now. She stiffened, but her expression turned quizzical instead of angry once she was over her surprise. You want to rob my house, she said thoughtfully, then broke into a smile. Please, tell me more. And this concludes Chapter 90 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it's up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read further ahead and support me, you can do that on my Patreon. I think at this point you get about 9 chapters ahead. And that broke my son. And if you want to listen to me do these live, it's on Twitch every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.